Before we get started, check the link in the description for this episode's notes and a free Warrior Mindset ebook. Now, on to our show. I see there's a lot of people that are on board with you about we're almost wussifying our culture, our men.
Nice word,
wussifying. Yeah, we're wussifying our men.
Jordan Peterson has talked about
and
that.
Those young men are the ones that pay for it the most. I mean, the whole culture pays for it, but
then we wonder, why are they kind of fledgling when they get in their 20s? Can't find a direction.
Hello, my friend. Have you ever felt like you're doing life, but you're not really choosing it? In this episode, Olaf and I explore the sacred power of choice and why your deepest freedom comes not from your circumstances, but from your connection to the sacred, your inner calling, and the wisdom traditions that remind us how to live well. Welcome to Olaf and Eric on Eric's Mindset platform. I'm deeply grateful to be doing this type of work, and I'm even more grateful that you're here with us. These conversations are part of something larger, something real. This episode dives into the core of spiritual and human identity, what it means to live on purpose, to stand for truth, and to walk in awareness, even when the world feels upside down.
Have you ever?
Let's get into it.
You're going to be a fool about how we live, or are you going to be wise about how you live?
Sure.
And religious systems are designed to help us do life wisely, to do life well.
That's what they're designed for?
You have that skeptical look. I love that. Like, oh, really?
Well, okay, I'll keep an open mind. I mean, I think at the core, when these things are written, so when you're having a mystical experience, this is where let's just talk about where some of the originating documents for like religious and spiritual work is coming from seeing. This is something I'm familiar with. I am very intuitive, and I see, which just simply means that I gave my imagination credibility and began to explore it.
Yep.
And so that's what seeing means. And then you can go from there into sort of different specialties within that realm to what you want to focus on. And I don't have any traditional training in this. I don't read many other people about this type of thing. I simply go into this forest and explore for myself. And so a lot of these work come from what you find there, because you spend time in a realm recognizing that this physical realm is not the entirety of existence, and you recognize that very deeply.
Yep.
The more time you spend here.
That's right.
And so many of the things that you come to recognize or realization about, you go, wow, how am I going to bring that down into back to the physical realm, share with my friends in the ways that we have to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And you can communicate that, through various types of artwork, whether it's paintings and music or stories, or however you can do that. And this is now, so these things get written out, and then I think over time they get twisted. They get twisted by our lower vibrational, you'll have to translate, our lower vibrational ways. They get twisted by our egoic ways, because we, we're in a lower density. So I think my perspective is that like it is our duty to raise the vibration, to be able to, and the way I would say it is to bring divinity to this realm.
Exactly. That's our calling.
And but we have to also recognize that that's not what everything is meant to do. Like there is like, why am I being reminded of Pinocchio?
Well, your nose is not that long, so I don't know. You know.
Well, Pinocchio is a story of awakening.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking of how he's being manipulated by those, who say that they're out for his best interest, but how would you say it? I think a lot of religious systems, particularly the one that's prevalent in this country, the United States, are meant to separate you from God, or at least that's how they're used, or they're meant to I come from the perspective of that God is not that is the perception that we're sold on.
Well, in Christian understanding, there is the otherness of the sacred, but on the other hand, there is also the imminence of the sacred. The sacred inherently within the fabric of existence, within the fabric of our experience. So if anyone says God is only other, well, they're certainly not in line with deeper Christian thinking, but especially mysticism, which says, no, we are intrinsically connected, the human and the sacred. But the human is also creaturely. The human is material, as well as ethereal and spiritual. We are creature. We are creature. Woody Harrelson, the actor, he's really a great actor.
Sure. Yeah.
And Torino, that movie, and happened to buzz by on a bicycle when they were filming the Torino, or something. Maybe not Torino, some movie in Detroit, and he was biking on Rochester Hills, the trail there, and Woody and a guy was zip past on a bike, and
Oh, you saw him?
Yeah. But anyway, so one of the questions from Steve Colbert's humorous, the question thing is, what is the most dangerous animal on the planet? And right away, Woody says, human.
Yeah.
And of course, Suzuki, the eco-psychologist philosopher, says, we need to remember we are animal. But I prefer the word creature. We are natural creature. And it's in our natural creaturehood where we can become splitting off from being really vitally connected to and in tune with the sacred dimension. We, like you say, we get egoic or egotistical and say, there is no divinity in this existence. It's just me and us and what we want and what we think is right and wrong and so on. It's kind of a form of authoritarianism that wants to take over humankind and tell us how to think, how to be, how to live. And true freedom comes when we connect, as I said, with the imminent sacred. There isn't just the transcendent sacred, the holy other, but there is the imminent sacred as well. And that's deep Christian thinking, but there's one more element, the relational sacred. The transcendent sacred, the imminent sacred, but the relational sacred. Or as Martin Buber, the great philosopher, Jewish thinker, thou, and he puts a capital T on it, and he says, part of the heart of spiritual life, connection and conviction is where my I is intrinsically, inherently connected to thou, the I thou, and he calls it the spirituality of the between. It's a we. When we're really connected with the sacred, it's all three. There is an otherness, and there is an imminence, a here-ness. But what's really fabulous, there is a deep relatedness. Deep relatedness. That's the good news. That the sacred is not anti-human. The sacred is not, oh, I wish I'd never, created you, you scumbags. There are some religious systems that kind of build their whole faith system on scumbagness.
Yeah.
You are scumbags, and crawl to the sacred, beg to the sacred. Maybe the sacred will kind of turn and say, if you do this and this and that and that and this and this and that and that, maybe I'll like you. That's not good. The good news is it all begins with grace. It all begins with gracious givenness. I didn't make me happen. Rudolph's seed and Edith's egg were the gracious manifestations of making me. Graciousness, gracious life is such a gift. And life is full of grace fields. This is morphogenic, energetic thinking, okay? Grace fields. There's all kinds of energy fields around us. Grace fields simply means the giftedness of life. And how do we appropriate that gift? That's the deep spiritual question. How am I choosing and doing and living my life? And the thing is, in the scripture, it says to the faith people, choose life. Choose life. In some sense, so many humans think, oh, I just do life. I just do it. I just kind of fall into it and just kind of do it. And sometimes I make some choices, but I kind of follow the crowd or whatever. And no, as life has chosen you with giftedness, now choose how you're going to live it. I remember talking to a funeral director as we were driving, and I was doing a funeral, as a cleric. And as we drove, I said, I read this statement just a little while ago. Your life is God's gift to you. What you do with it is your gift to God. And I remember when he was driving, he was a funeral director, a young guy in his mid-30s, kind of looked at me like, wow, you could see in his eyes that he really took that statement in. About a week and a half later, I got a letter. This was before email days. I got a letter from him thanking me for that statement. Because he said, I've been doing a whole analysis of my life. What am I living for? What am I after? What's important to me? Why? Why live? Why do I do life? I mean, he got into a framework of active chosenness. I'm going to choose how I really want to live. And I'm going to choose it in the framework of the grace fields that comes from the dimension of the sacred.
Let's get on the nuts and bolts, because
Good.
Look, choosing life, what does that even mean? Because I can tell you
An attitude. As a counselor, I can't tell you how many people hate life, kind of are almost wanting to dischoose it, but feel like they don't have the courage just to, check out. Suicide. Or such desperation or despair. Suicide. In some life, it's your attitude toward life. I mean, life is a gift. It's an active thing, grabbing onto my calling, my purpose. And that's not a religious thing. That's like a core human, natural nature thing. To live with meaning, to live with purpose, to have a moral compass about what's right and good. That's choosing life. And that can consequate to little things like, well, what vocation, what career do I choose? And from a spiritual perspective, what what really helps if a person gets into a sense of deeper purpose, a deeper sense of, yes, this is me. Like when I was at the hospital beginning an internship, and in the hospital library had this metamorphosis I've talked about to combine psychology and theology. And it was a calling. And I have a book, thick book on the psychology of calling. A sense of purposefulness. That's one of the graces. One of the graces in your life is you have the talent and for construction. You have made pools. You're working on a truck. Like you said,
I don't know if I'd call that a
you're a
grace.
good hands worker. You're a hands worker.
Yeah.
But you're also a soul worker. You go deeper. And you've tapped into some of these esoteric science and art elements to understand it better. And here we are, in some sense, trying to impart some of the golden nuggets of these spiritual perspectives that we have. I'm going deeper.
Yeah, I mean, you look when you have these experiences within yourself, you look into what other people perceive and their interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not asking anybody else to interpret what I see.
Right.
As far as like understanding it.
But I like to listen to what they see and glean from it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But as far as choosing life, look, what I'm getting at is sometimes, your Israelites are staring down the Philistines and they got a giant, and so yeah. I suppose that's acceptable that you could say, look, your inner David has to say, yeah, it doesn't matter how small I am, and it doesn't matter how big the giant looks. It has to be a matter of attitude.
Creative craftiness. When I think of David, creative craftiness. But he had developed a skill with a slingshot to protect the sheep in his very early days, as tradition says, and he realized that the slingshot was a nice way to ward off wild animals that were coming to have a lunch, you don't do lunch here. Go to find some McDonald's. You don't take a sheep here, whatever. So he was very skillful in slinging a stone at the speed of a bullet. And we know the story. Samson,
Right. We're talking, of course, about David and Goliath.
Or Goliath, rather. Right. Not
right. And
Goliath.
Right. But the attitude doesn't just make the giant go away. Attitude doesn't make the army go away. You actually have to take the action, and you have to take the behavior on the attitude and go through the process. It doesn't make the drama evaporate. Just because you choose life doesn't make it easy.
The thing that also comes to mind is, in some sense, David, with his skill to take down Goliath with a slingshot and a stone to Goliath's head, was a warrior protecting his community, the integrity of his people. And I think about the book Iron John. I wish I could remember the name of the poet. Iron John was a paperback good number of years ago. I remember reading it like around 1990, okay? And Iron John defined the warrior. He said, what's happening in our society, we are no longer creating warriors. Referring to men, in this case, Iron John. He was talking about the psychic, spiritual patterns of what this society might be doing with men. De-warrying them. But what is a warrior? Not someone who tears a shirt in a wrestling ring or takes out a gun and shoots somebody. A warrior is one who protects the integrity of the people, protects the order and well-being and integrity of one's family, one's community, one's culture, one's society. Warriors are those who stand up for good order and what's right. And if it's being threatened by malevolent forces, sometimes one has to use defensive, violent means to stop violence. The just war theory is an outcome of that. Christian theologians have said there's a place for defensive violence, and of course some disagree with that. Super pacifist, pacifism works best for everybody. That's an ideal, but Christian thinkers like Reinhold Niebuhr says, yeah, that'd be nice, but that's not the real deal. The real deal is we need the David against the Goliath. But
yeah, I would say there's a lot of people that are on board with you about we're almost wussifying our culture, our men.
Nice word,
yeah,
wussifying.
We're wussifying our men.
Yeah, and boys, many number of people have been on different talk shows talking about. Jordan Peterson has talked about
and
that.
Those young men are the ones that pay for it the most. I mean, the whole culture pays for it, but
then we wonder, why are they kind of fledgling when they get in their 20s? Can't find a direction. Don't dare even have sex because really, they become there's a term for it.
And it's
celibates.
And it's not for lack of caring or trying. It's for a lack of the confusing message that we give our children.
Yes. Kind of drifting and gigging and of course our economic patterns don't also do as good a job with supporting the young in their aspirational phase of their life in their 20s, like me. I had to work hard to be successful, but I had a wonderful economic platform to help me up into a good job, decent pay, where I could start a family, have a car, have habitat, eventually buy a house. How many young people can do that as smoothly as we in our 60s and 70s did? Our society has really, has really lost its good moorings. It's off the track. It's no longer wise. Wisdom tradition, and part of my dedication is to empower people with the wisdom that comes from many fields: spiritual, religious, psychological, social psychological, sociological, etc.
Okay. So now back to what we were talking about, or what you brought up to the beginning. Well, yeah, I would say that there are many destabilizing elements to our culture right now. Some of them very intentional. And we allow that to happen.
And what are some destabilizing elements that you're thinking of?
Oh, I don't know if I even want to bring it up. The first thing that I think of is people that have money and power that don't like our country. Like a George Soros type would be the first one type that would come to mind.
Okay.
Or ideologies that come from a meaningful place at first, but then twist it.
Yes.
I don't know if you're going to continue to agree when the one I mention is because it is feminism. And the reason I mention this, and here's my perception, is that, look, everybody should be on equal footing, but the fact that, but we're not the same, though. And
the feminist movement isn't saying we're the same.
Yeah.
With the feminist movement, and I'm an ally of the feminist movement.
Okay.
It doesn't mean we have to have the same bathroom, but there can be a men's bathroom and a women's bathroom, and they're both equally good bathrooms. They're clean, they're accessible, they work well, that kind of thing. And human structures did, over the centuries, favor men, favor the male over the female. Female, you're here to serve me. I will tell us how to live, and so on. And the feminist movement is saying, hey, we're equal. It comports with the first chapter of Genesis. It comports with what the Bible says right from the get-go. Humankind was created than the Creator said. This is Genesis 1:26. Funny how I have this page open. Really, let us, by the way, the Hebrew word for God is plural, a kind of a plural sacred, Let us, but it's used singularly in language. Let us make humankind in our image to be like us. In other words, to have creative capacity. Let them be stewards of the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the cattle, the wild animals, everything that crawls on the ground. Stewarding, caring for, being iron johns to protect life and community. But here's the clincher. Humankind was created as God's reflection. In the divine image, God created them. Female and male, God made them. Totally equal. But society has lifted malehood over the centuries to be above the female. And one of the most horrendous current examples of that. Talk about something that kills the personhood and the spirit of women. Afghanistan. The Taliban. They don't let women be full persons. You have to cover your face. You have to walk with a man. Don't you dare even talk to your friends. You are there to be in bed and in the kitchen. Make babies and be quiet. I mean, it's just, I know that's kind of maybe a bit excessive, but no, I am so angry at the mistreatment of women in Afghanistan. And I knew that when President Biden pulled out of there quickly, but President Trump in his first term helped to set it up. So both presidents are responsible, in setup and follow through about, leaving Afghanistan.
That was a disaster in a multitude of ways.
And I knew the women are F. The women are. Just give a few months, give a little bit of time. The Taliban leaders will talk nice and say, "Oh, we understand now. We will treat women fairly." I knew better. I mean, you want to talk about distortive religiosity? It's horrendous. That is not spiritual in any way that fits the Bible, or your metaphysics, or your beneficent esoteric. What's happening with the religiosity perversion in Afghanistan is horrible. Horrible, why? Because they betray what our Creator said about the equality of male and female.
Right. So, okay, well, some of that I agree with as far as like, people are created equal, basically. Beingness, existence is God itself, in my perspective. Okay. So, and again, every distortion, every manipulation that has power started with something that is true, that could impassion and embolden people into a certain direction, and then is twisted. And that's what I'm saying a lot of religion is. And that's what I was pointing at. Not that there isn't anything good in in the basic idea of feminism. It's what how it was destabilizing. So, for instance,
major change is destabilizing.
For instance, it's not just the major change; it's that like the destabilization of our household and where it puts us. This isn't the only reason, but now, it was now it's almost necessary for both people to work in a household just because of economic conditions.
Right.
However, there was a time when nobody wanted to stay home with the kids. It seemed in certain households traditionally, the women stayed home with the kids, and there wasn't a problem with that. And that seems to be how we were, even from a tribal perspective. That's how we were constructed.
Yeah, that's a social construct that can work. Yes,
women are better at communicating and being with the children, more patient and more empathic, and it's better for them to keep the home front while the men go out and catch the lion or whatever.
Yes, and here is the one phrase that I think, captures what you're talking about. Complementary opposites.
Yeah.
But they're complementary. Doesn't mean that they're the same, but they are the complementary. As warriors go hunt for food all day, the women in the village weave baskets, and take care of the children and make sure that the community is ready for the gathering when the warriors come back with the resources of food or whatever. Yes, but it was complementary. And it wasn't like one is superior to the other. Both were necessary for good community to happen. Care for the children, develop an alliance between families, be at peace, and so on and so forth. And the second story of Genesis has been misinterpreted, because there are two creation stories. I quoted from the first one in the first chapter, but Genesis 2 and 3 gets to another version of what it means to be male and female. And that story has been so misinterpreted today. Adam, the male, came first. And then Adam was put to sleep, and the rib was taken out of Adam and made woman. Now, because Adam was first, and it's his rib, what does that imply? It implies a certain dominance and superiority. But when the Hebrew language is really unpacked, the original statement, which means the original experience of insight from the sacred, illumination and inspiration, earth creature, Hadam means earth creature, that at first our Creator thought, singular earth creature. And wait a minute, that doesn't work. Singular earth creature in relationship to other creatures, that doesn't seem to work. So, Creator puts earth creature to sleep and splits earth creature into gender differentiation. Hadam and Eve, but people say, but earth creature was put to sleep, and de-ribbed. Well, yeah, but it doesn't make the idea that male is first is wrong. Creaturehood is first. We are creatures. We are spiritual creatures. We are creatures having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a creaturely experience. Our bodies and our emotions are number 1 and 2 before we reason things through. So we are a creature, but we are spiritual creatures. Male and female has come from the common ground. But what happens in the breach, the curse is male domination. It's a curse. In Genesis, it says, a curse upon humankind is male will try to dominate female. So you go to the book of Ephesians, 5:21 to be specific, and Paul writes in this letter, he says, submit to each other out of Christ. Submit to each other in the grace of our Creator in life. I grew from the feminist movement, not because I was anti-feminist, but I was I was born and raised in Europe, patriarchal. The man is sort of in charge, And then the feminist movement influenced my partner, and we worked out a better balance. Like, hey, I'm not in charge. It's we together. And it got better.
Yeah. Okay. We got to cut it off there. But
yeah,
I'm
sorry,
I'm most definitely not saying. I mean, we like to be very what is it? Dualistic in our culturally. It's like you're on my side or you're on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's most certainly not what I'm saying. It's not like either you're feminist or you're a Republican. No, people should be treated equally. What I'm saying is, there's some good points to all of these things. And I think the feminism, there's some good points to all of these things, but they can also be used in ways that are less than
Well, yeah, and
helpful to
look,
us.
I agree with you. A lot of distortions can come from this. Can be a heck of a challenge. And how do we do gender roles? And there was something sweet about post-World War II middle-class living, where the man went to work, was paid well, even as a blue-collar worker. Women stayed at home, built the home, new suburbs, built community with each other, raised the kids. The men came home, and they could rest for a while, get their feet up. Edith, where's the beer? But, that was a bit sexist there. But, and then together, enjoy the children in the evening. Yes, you're right. In a lot of ways, it's not the same. It's a challenge. That's what I'm trying to say. Absolutely. It's a challenge to be creatively relational, while being male and female.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's more to say there because we have to get out of the either this or this.
Okay.
But I don't, we have to cut it off there. Sorry, I have an appointment in 28 minutes.
Dentist appointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.